The air hangs thick with jasmine and fear, that late summer evening in Modiin, where the hills fold like forgotten prayers under a bruising sky. You hear at first the distant tramp of boots on parched earth, a rhythm that swallows the laughter from the wedding feast. Then the smell hits, sweat-soaked leather, oiled iron, the faint rot of olives crushed under marching feet. Torches flare in the olive grove, casting shadows that twist like serpents across the whitewashed walls of the bride's home. She stands at the threshold, Channah, her veil trembling in the breeze, her fingers laced with her betrothed's. Eleazar, a quiet scholar, with ink-stained hands and eyes that promise a life of whispered psalms. The guests hush, flutes falling silent, as the door splinters inward. A Greek officer strides through, his cloak heavy with the dust of Antioch, his smile a blade unsheathed. By order of the king, he declares, voice smooth as venom, the bride belongs to the governor tonight. Tomorrow, she is yours if she survives the dawn. Channah's breath catches, a gasp swallowed by the crowd's murmur. Eleazar steps forward, but her hand tightens on his. Not yet. The officer's laugh echoes, low and certain, as soldiers fan out, their hands already reaching. But in that frozen heartbeat, something shifts. A woman's voice rises, sharp as shattered clay. No more. The grove erupts not in screams, but in the scrape of hidden daggers, the roar of men who have buried their rage too long. This is no mere wedding. This is the spark that will burn an empire. What follows is a tale of calculated cruelty, woven into the fabric of conquest. It involves decrees of violation, the shattering of sacred nights, and the unyielding spirit of those who refuse to yield their souls. These events, drawn from ancient chronicles and shadowed traditions, carry the weight of documented horror. If the shadows grow too dark, pause. Honor your own thresholds. For those who remain, we turn not to dwell in the wound, but to dismantle the machine that forged it, the cold gears of power that turned human joy into a weapon of control. Imagine a world cracked open by ambition, where the sun-baked plains of Syria stretch like a promise of glory, and the throne of Antioch gleams with the plunder of forgotten gods. This is the Seleucid Empire, born from the corpse of Alexander the Great's dreams, sprawling from the jagged peaks of Persia to the sun-bleached shores of the Mediterranean. By the mid-2nd century before the Common Era, it commands nearly 3 million square miles, a mosaic of satrapies stitched together by Greek coin and spear. Cities pulse with philosophers debating in marble agoras, markets overflow with spices from the east and wine from the islands, and armies march under eagles that once flew for a conqueror, now dust. At its heart sits Antioch, a jewel of columns and aqueducts, where silk-robed envoys haggle over tribute and slaves whisper of home in the shadows of colossal statues. Yet beneath the veneer of unity, fault lines spiderweb the stone. The empire, forged in 312 before the Common Era, when Alexander's general Seleucus claimed the eastern realms, has weathered a century of wars against the Ptolemies of Egypt, the fractious Parthians to the east, and the unyielding Romans gnawing at its western flanks. Tribute flows like blood from the veins of subject peoples, silver from Tyrian mines, grain from Mesopotamian fields, loyalty enforced by garrisons that dot the landscape like iron thorns. Judea, a sliver of rugged hills and sacred groves wedged between empires, has long been a reluctant jewel in this crown. Conquered by Antiochus III in 198 before the Common Era after a bruising clash at Peneus, it pays its tithes in oil and wool, its temple in Jerusalem, a glittering exception amid the Hellenistic sprawl, a house of one god amid the clamor of many. The tension simmers not from borders alone, but from the soul of rule itself. Hellenism, that intoxicating brew of gymnasia and theaters, gods with human flaws and humans chasing divine excess, spreads like wildfire through the empire's veins. Kings style themselves as Zeus's kin, erecting altars where local deities once stood, demanding obeisance as the price of peace. In Judea, this clashes against a faith etched in stone, one invisible God, laws that bind body and spirit, a covenant that whispers of exile for those who stray. The high priests, once shepherds of this ancient rite, now navigate a treacherous court where gold buys favor and whispers of reform echo from Antioch. Jason, a priest eager for Greek tunics and olive-crowned games, bribes his way to the high priesthood in 175, turning Jerusalem's sacred hill into a stage for Dionysian revels. His successor, Menelaus, outbids him with temple silver, sparking riots that ripple like stones in a still pond. Into this brew steps Antiochus IV, a man forged not in marble halls, but in the crucibles of loss and cunning, born around 215 before the Common Era, the son of the great Antiochus III, who once humbled Egypt only to kneel before Roman legions at Magnesia. In 190, he knows the bite of empire's fragility. As a youth, he sails to Rome as hostage, trading Seleucid gold for the spectacle of gladiatorial sands and the Senate's honeyed rhetoric. There, amid the forum's clamor, he learns the art of the crowd, a flash of coin, a jest that disarms, the subtle flex of power veiled as generosity. Freed in 175 upon his brother's murder, he seizes the diadem not by blood right, but by audacity, allying with Pergamene kings, poisoning rivals, and parading his nephew as co-ruler before snuffing the boy's light. He crowns himself Epiphanes, God manifest, a title that mocks the heavens even as it courts them. Antiochus arrives not as monster, but as mirror to his fractured world. The empire bleeds silver. Wars against Ptolemaic Egypt drain the coffers. Parthian horsemen raid the Silk Roads, and Rome's envoys circle like vultures, demanding tribute for the peace they impose. In Antioch, he dazzles with elephant parades and free grain, but his eyes sharp as a falcon's scan for disloyalty. Judea, with its stubborn god and silver-hoarding temple, becomes a fault line. Jason's games amuse him, Menelaus's bribes delight, but whispers from Jerusalem speak of unrest. Priests clinging to old scrolls, villagers scorning the gymnasium's naked runners. Antiochus sees not faith, but fracture a people who could tip the scales if Egypt stirs again. His early years on the throne hum with calculated charm. He funds theaters in distant cities, marries his sister to seal alliances, and marches on Egypt in 169, sacking its shrines for gold to gild his dreams. But Rome intervenes at Eleusis, a legate staff drawing a line in the sand. Withdraw or face legions. Humiliation burns like bile. Returning through Judea, false rumors of his death ignite Jason's coup. Antiochus storms Jerusalem, slaughters thousands, plunders the temple's golden menorah, and table of showbread 1,800 talents melted into war coin. This is no random rage. It is the machine grinding to life. A decree follows. No more circumcision, no Sabbaths, no scrolls of law. The temple, rededicated to Zeus Olympios, its altar stained with pig's blood on the 25th of Kislev, 167 before the Common Era. Possession of Torah, death by torture, refusal to eat the unclean, flames for the faithful. Yet the decree that truly hollows the marrow, the one whispered in shadowed homes, the one that silences wedding songs, is the shadow over the bridal bed. In the hills of Judea, where olive presses groan under autumn's yield, governors issue edicts veiled as custom. Every bride, on her chuppah night, must first yield to the local commander's touch. It is no ancient rite revived, no jus prime noctis from forgotten scrolls, but a blade honed for erasure, not mere conquest, but the seeding of despair, turning joy's threshold into violation's gate, ensuring no pure lineage endures, no unscarred future blooms. Families wed in secret, or not at all. Veils gather dust in cedar chests. This is the system's genius. Not swords alone, but the slow poison of hopelessness, making rebellion seem a kinder fate than surrender. Antiochus did not wake to cruelty. It was etched in his bones. As a boy in Apamea, he watched his father's legions shatter at Roman hands, the elephants trampling their own in panic's crush. "We are gods no longer," Antiochus III might have muttered, binding his son as surety 11 years in Rome's unyielding grip, where patrician feasts masked the empire's leash. There, amid the bath's steam and senators' schemes, young Antiochus tasted power's illusion, a hostage king, charming his jailers with tales of Eastern wonders, learning that loyalty is bought, not born. Returning, he finds his brother slain by a scheming treasurer, the throne a viper's nest. He strikes first poison for the boy king, exile for rivals, climbing not on merit, but on the corpses of kin. Paranoia blooms. Every envoy from Egypt whispers revolt. Every priest's glance hides a dagger. Judea, with its one God who topples tyrants, mirrors his deepest dread, the divine not manifest in him, but absent. 3 moments crystallize the man into the edict. First, the Egyptian triumph of 169. Cities fall, treasures flood Antioch, but Rome's rebuke at Eleusis strips him bare. A god mocked by mortals, rage festers. Second, Jerusalem's plunder. Entering the temple, he feels not awe, but envy. The Jews' God demands no statues, yet binds a people tighter than any chain. He vows to unmake it. Third, the whispers from Menelaus. Unrest in the hills, priests hoarding gold for rebellion. Antiochus, ever the showman, turns theater to terror. The decrees cascade like a dam, breaking not madness, but method. Hellenism as weapon, gyms to weaken bodies, altars to shatter spirits, and the bridal shadow to poison bloodlines. If they will not bend, his scribes might have penned, let them break in the dark. And then, in the dusty lanes of Modiin, it crystallizes. A village priest, Mattathias, buries his grief under prayer shawls, his 7 children, the quiet fire of his line. His daughter, Channah, 20 summers old, tends the hearth with hands calloused from loom and loaf. Her laughter, a rare bloom in the gloom of edicts. Betrothed to Eleazar, a scribe whose fingers trace letters like lovers' vows, she dreams of a home where psalms greet the dawn. But the decree arrives on horseback, sealed with Antioch's eagle. No bride enters her chamber untouched by the governor's hand. 3 years it has lingered, a specter at every feast, sisters vanishing into the night, returning hollow-eyed, or not at all. Weddings whisper in cellars, the hills echo with unspoken vows. Mattathias gathers his sons, Judas, the hammer-fisted warrior, Eleazar, the scholar, the others, fierce in their youth around the oil lamps, his voice a low thunder. We endure, he says, eyes on the flickering flame. God tests the faithful. But Channah, overhearing from the shadows, feels the weight like chains on her throat. She is no fragile reed. Raised on tales of Miriam's timbrel and Deborah's sword, she has bound wounds from Roman patrols and sung defiance in the women's circle. Yet this, to be the vessel of empire's spite, her body the battlefield before the first arrow flies, the turning point comes not in a marketplace brawl, but in the hush of her chamber, veil in hand, as the officer's boots echo closer. She faces her father, eyes like polished onyx. If you let this pass, what sons will you sire for a god who weeps? The machine meets its mirror, not in steel, but in a woman's unyielding gaze. The sun dips low over Modiin that autumn, painting the hills in ochre and blood, as if the land itself foresees the fracture. Smoke curls from hearth fires, carrying the scent of lentil stew and fresh-baked flatbread, a fragile normalcy against the empire's grind. Families cluster in courtyards, children chasing goats through olive rows, while elders murmur over scrolls half hidden in floor niches. Jerusalem lies a day's march north, its temple a distant thunderhead of white stone, now echoing with foreign chants where incense once rose pure. Antiochus's decrees have taken root like weeds in cracked soil. Markets shudder on Sabbaths, lest patrols descend. Boys bear scars where foreskins once marked covenant. The air hums with informants, Hellenized merchants trading whispers for favor, priests like Menelaus counting silver in shadowed vaults. Channah moves through this world like a shadow seeking light. At 20, she is the village's quiet anchor. Dawn finds her at the well, drawing water with a rhythm that soothes the weary. Midday, her hands weave linen fine as prayer, threads dyed indigo from the wadi's snails. Her laughter, rare now, draws villagers like moths, stories of her mother's songs, of stars named for the faithful. Eleazar courts her with borrowed boldness, slipping notes in the folds of her shawl, verses from forgotten psalms, promises of a hearth where God alone presides. Their betrothal, sealed under a canopy of myrtle last spring, whispers of continuity, a thread unbroken amid the unraveling. She envisions it, the kuppa's veil lifting to reveal not just a husband, but a future where children chase fireflies without fear of the governor's knock. But the shadow lengthens. Rumors slither from Jerusalem. Jason's ousted, Menelaus reigns with Antioch's gold, and now this decree, born in the king's rage after Egypt's rebuke. It arrives on parchment unfurled in the village square, read by a trembling elder under spear point. By grace of Epiphanes, divine manifest, Every bride shall honor the crown's steward on her wedding eve. Thus unity binds the realm. Honor, the word sours like milk left in the sun. Villages south of Hebron report the toll. A merchant's daughter, wed in secret, dragged from her bed, a shepherd's bride, returned at dawn with eyes like shattered glass, whispering of hands that reeked of myrrh and malice. Families bargained dowries doubled, feasts feigned grandeur to buy delay, but the machine turns inexorable. In Modiin, weddings falter, the loom gathers dust, for what linen survives untouched? The confrontation brews not in blaze, but simmer. Mattathias, a priest of the old line, tends the village's small shrine, a niche of weathered stone, where oil lamps flicker against the wall. Gray threads his beard, but his frame holds the vigor of hills climbed in youth, hands scarred from altar fires long doused. He counsels endurance. God scattered Pharaoh's host. He will shatter this. His sons nod Judas, broad-shouldered and quick, with the staff. The others, echoes of their father's fire. Channah listens from the doorway, her betrothal feast 3 days hence, the veil folded like a wound. That evening, as stars prick the indigo sky, the officer arrives, Nicanor, a captain from the Acra's garrison, his tunic embroidered with Zeus's thunderbolt. He lounges in the courtyard, wine cup in hand, as if guest, not gaoler. The king unites us all, he toasts, eyes lingering on Channah as she serves. Tomorrow's joy begins tonight, under the crown's blessing. The demand lands like a stone in still water. Mattathias stiffens, but words fail. The sons clench fists under the table. Channah feels it coil in her gut, not fear alone, but fury, hot as forge coals. She slips away at dusk, veil clutched like a shield, and finds her father in the shrine. Endurance is surrender, she says, voice steady as the earth's turn. If my bed becomes the altar, what of the daughters after? Mattathias falters, the weight of kinsmen's pleas echoing, hide the feast, bribe the captain, wait for God's hour. But Channah presses, God waits for hands raised, not bowed. Dawn breaks with the patrol's horns, soldiers cordoning the village paths. Eleazar stands pale at the gate, dagger hidden in his sash. The choice crystallizes, yield, and the line frays, resist, and the hills ignite. The act unfolds not in thunder, but in the hush before storm. Nicanor enters the bridal chamber at twilight, torchlight dancing on walls painted with faded vines, the air heavy with myrtle and unspoken dread. Channah stands veiled, back to the lintel, her breath measured as a dirge. He reaches, murmuring of royal grace, but the door holds for a moment, a lifetime. Outside, Mattathias's voice rises in the grove, a cry against the apostate Jew who steps forward to comply, a blade flashing in the half-light. The captain whirls, but too late. The suns surge like floodwaters, daggers from hearth sheaths, staves from shepherd's crook. Nicanor falls, blood pooling on the threshold like libation refused. The soldiers clash in the courtyard, 20 against 5, iron against will, but the villagers rise, pitchforks and stones joining the fray. Flames lick the patrol's tents as cries echo, for the God of our fathers. Word spreads like embers on dry grass. By morning, Modiin smokes, but not in defeat. Barns emptied of pitch, paths to Jerusalem alive with runners bearing the tale, not of one bride spared, but of a line crossed. The system's demand met with steel. This was no isolated grief. It was the machine laid bare, a bureaucracy of violation, where scribes in Antioch tallied pacified villages while governors claimed their toll, incentives flowing upward in gold, and reports of compliance. Unite or perish, the edicts proclaimed, but in human measure it hollowed homes, a generation of brides who wed shadows, grooms who fathered doubts, elders who buried joy with their dead. Whispers from Galilee speak of similar shadows, a fisherman's daughter vanishing mid-vow, her veil found torn by the sea. Yet here, in Modiin's dust, resistance breathes. Families smuggling scrolls in bridal linens, women forging daggers from loom weights, men drilling in wadis under moonless skies. This wasn't about one chamber's violation. This was a counting empire's ledger balancing loyalty against lives, where a king's whim becomes governor's right, and right becomes routine. In our own shadowed ledgers, we see echoes, regimes that tax bodies as surely as coin, turning private thresholds into public claims. But in Modiin, the tally shifts. The machine, oiled by fear, finds grit in a woman's resolve. Winter bites early that year, the Jordan's banks frosting under a sky like hammered lead, as the empire's fist tightens not in fire, but frost. From the Acra's heights, that squat fortress crowning Jerusalem's southern spur, its walls a smuggle of Cyclopean stone and Syrian bronze, the view stretches to olive-draped hills, a land bent but unbroken. Inside, Lysias, the king's viceroy, pores over dispatches by lamplight, Modiin raised, a captain slain, priests fleeing to caves like vermin. No longer the perpetrator's gaze, but the executor's men like Apollonius, scarred from Egyptian sands, tasked with threading the decrees through Judea's veins. He rides north at dawn, 2,000 spearmen in tow, their cloaks stiff with mountain chill, breath clouding like ghosts of the unavenged. The machinery whirs with grim efficiency. In Lydda, a market town where figs once sweetened the air, Apollonius seals the decree with fresh ink. Every groom must witness the governor's claim, lest rebellion fester in unspoken shame. Incentives dangle silver for informants, land for the compliant, while reports cascade to Antioch. Villages yield, brides honor the crown, but human terms defy the tally. Whole hamlets empty overnight, families trekking to Ein-Gedi's cliffs, where springs bubble amid date palms, hiding not just bodies, but the stubborn pulse of song. A breather comes in the wadi's hush, an old goatherd, pausing mid-trail, shares bread with fugitives warm, coarse, flecked with wild thyme, its crust cracking like laughter in the wind. The stars remember, he says, pointing to Orion's belt, and so do we. Ironic that the king's unity scatters his prey like seeds on fertile soil. Escalation shifts southward, to Bethzur's terrace slopes, where stone walls cradle vineyards like cradles. Here, the witness emerges, not victim, but observer. Miriam, a widow of 40 winters, her hands gnarled from vintner's shears, her home a way station for the hunted. She saw the first decree's shadow fall 3 springs past. Her niece, a girl of blooming cheeks, wed in haste to a potter's son, only for the governor's man to claim her at the canopy's edge. Miriam watched from the lattice, heart pounding like a hidden drum, as the girl returned at cockcrow, shawl clutched like armor, whispering, "It ends with me." But it didn't. Now, as Apollonius's host encamps below, Miriam shelters fugitives in her cellar, Mattathias's kinsmen, their faces gaunt with cave dust. She feeds them raisins plump as promises, men's tunics torn in skirmishes, and listens as they plot. Judas, the hammer, scouting passes, Eleazar charting stars for night raids. The spread reveals the system's sinews. Couriers on swift mules relay tallies from satrap to scribe, gold flowing to loyalists who enforce the bridal toll with zeal born of fear. Numbers dissolve into faces, a shepherd's clan vanishing into the Negev, their flocks lowing unanswered. A scribe's wife, defiant, swallowing poison rather than yield, her body a quiet testament in the dawn light. Yet contrast pierces the gray. In a hidden glen, fugitives share a stolen feast, lamb roasted over thornbrush, wine from smuggled amphorae, their songs rising soft, a dark melody amid the machine's grind. One moment crystallizes the angle, a different victim, not bride but mother Rachel, her 7 sons dragged to the Acra for refusing swine's flesh. She watches, unbowed, as flames claim the eldest, her voice a thread, choose life, eternal. The crowd, Hellenizers and holdouts alike, stirs, whispers turning to murmurs. The executor, Apollonius, reports compliance, but his quill hesitates. The system's cogs, oiled though they are, begin to bind. From Lysias's perch, the view sours. Reports multiply, villages feigning obedience, then ambushing patrols, scrolls unearthed in vineyard middens, read by firelight to steel the faint-hearted. The bridal decree, meant to fracture lineages, forges something fiercer alliances born in cellars, where widows like Miriam trade bread for blades. Incentives twist. A governor, bloated on tribute, finds his bed empty one night, throat slit by a groom's vow. The machine escalates, garrisons doubled, inquisitors scouring homes, but the hills answer with echoes, arrows from unseen bows, fires on supply lines. In this shift, the horror scales not in single chambers, but in the land's quiet rebellion. Families no longer scattering alone, but converging, their shared scars a map to uprising. The breather lingers in Miriam's hearth, a pot of barley simmering, steam carrying sense of home to men who fight not for crowns, but cradles yet unborn. Spring thaws the Jordan's edges that fateful year, but no warmth touches Jerusalem's heights, where the Acra looms like a tumor on the city's flank. Cherry blossoms dust the Kidron Valley, a cruel jest against the smoke rising from pyres below, where inquisitors burn scrolls by the cartload. The climax cruise slow, time stretching like taffy pulled taut. Each dawn brings patrols clashing in narrow passes, each dusk a tally of the fallen Seleucid bronze bent, Jewish staves splintered. Lysias marshals 40,000 from Antioch, their phalanxes a glittering serpent coiling south, elephants trumpeting war through the Judean gates. Judas, the hammer, meets them at Beth Zachariah, his 6,000 ragged but relentless, the air thick with dust and the tang of sweat-soaked wool. Peak horror crests not in blades' flash, but in the temple's desecration, now a year etched in ash. The altar, once fragrant with frankincense, bears Zeus's effigy, its base crusted from porcine rites, a violation scaled to sanctity's core, where priests once whispered atonement, now echo with forced chants to Olympian thunder. Sensory onslaught grips the faithful, the sizzle of unclean fat on sacred stone, the acrid bite of idol smoke mingling with incense's ghost. The chants drone like locusts devouring prayer. Crowds gather at the outer courts, a sea of shawls and staffs, as soldiers prod them forward, bow or burn. Refusal ripples an elder's staff raised, a mother's wail as her boy is torn away, building to the breaking wave. The act implies itself in the aftermath's hush. No gore spilled in verse, but the echo of chains rattling in the dungeon's drip, the gasp of air denied, as inquisitors' hands close on throats. Scale swallows the singular not one bride's shadow, but a nation's, as decrees cascade, families targeted whole, sons circumcised in defiance, dragged to flames, their cries a chorus swallowed by the wind. The crack fishers not in victim, but machine. Overreach at Emmaus, where Judas's ambush shatters a vanguard, elephants trampling their own in panic's mill. Lysias retreats, bloodied, his reports to Antioch frantic. The hills breed fanatics. Antioch rages, but distance dulls the blade. Parthian raids pull the king's eye east. The system stutters. Garrisons starve, informants turn, the bridal toll unpaid as weddings bloom in caves. The breaking spreads like dawn's reluctant light. In Hebron's cellars, survivors huddle Miriam among them, her hands now gripping a staff, not shears sharing tales that bind, Channah's veil, now banner, Mattathias's cry, now creed. Judas presses north, his band swelling to 10,000, the Acra's shadow shrinking as rams batter its gates. The perpetrator's portrait fractures. Antiochus, far in Persia's dust, hears of cracks in his divine facade, his body wasting under boils that mock his manifest flesh. The overreach boomerangs decrees, meant to unify, splinter the empire's edge, resistance's spark, leaping to Galilee's shores. Transition whispers in the wind, from violation's dark to dawn's fierce glow, where a woman's unspoken vow becomes the land's loud roar. Autumn winds strip the pomegranates bare that year, their rinds splitting like judgments on the hills, as the empire's fist unclenches not in mercy, but exhaustion. Antiochus, campaigning east against Parthian bows, collapses in Tabay, his body a ruin of fever and regret, whispers of divine wrath on his lips. Dead at 51, his god manifest reduced to a pyre in foreign sands, the throne passes to a boy king, Eupator, under Lysias's trembling regency. No heroic blaze claims him, just the ignoble gasp of a man outrun by his own shadows. Survivors emerge from wadis like roots seeking sun. Channah, veil mended into armor, weds Eleazar in a ceremony under stars. Their union, a quiet defiance, children born to psalms, not decrees. Mattathias, slain early in the fray, rests in Modiin's soil, his grave a pilgrim's touchstone, sons carrying his fire. Judas hammers the Acra's fall in 141, forging Hasmonean rule from revolt's forge. The community mends unevenly. Hellenizers slink to shadows, faithful reclaiming fields fallow with fear, but power shifts seismic. Judea breathes autonomous, high priests crowned not by Antioch's gold, but people's voice. Long-term scars linger, a generation's trust fractured, faith tempered harder, yet the temple's rededication on Kislev's 25th floods, the nights with light, oil burning 8 days in miracles hush. Ironic twist. The decree's parchments, meant to bind, fuel the rebels' pyres. The Akra, symbol of control, crumbles to quarries for synagogues. Empire's machine, oiled on erasure, grinds to reveal resilience as grain. Centuries bury the hills in dust, but the Judean wadis guard their secrets like misers' caves, yawning in cliff faces, where refugees once scratched pleas to stone. It begins in the 1,950 seconds, amid mandate's end and state's birth, when Bedouin shepherds stumble on scrolls in Qumran's dryness, the Dead Sea cache, fragments of Torah defiant against time's tide. But the deeper trove waits. In 2015, amid Jerusalem's clamor, archaeologist Doron Ben-Ami's spade bites the city of David's flank. Layers peel back, a glacis of packed earth sloping to thwart siege ladders, walls 3 meters thick, pierced by arrow slits, bronze heads stamped with trident Antiochus's mark. The Akra emerges, not myth but mortar, its foundations laced with sling stones that felled Greek phalanges. Ben-Ami, bespectacled and steady, brushes dirt from a tile. Here stood the machine's heart. Tangible as the earth's turn, the find humanizes the haze. Coins glint in lantern-light silver shekels of Antiochus, edges worn by frantic flight hoarded in Muraba'at cave. 2022's dig unearthing a wooden box, its lid splintered by hope deferred. A refugee's hand packed them, perhaps a bride's dowry untouched by decree, hidden as patrols thundered past. Papyrus scraps flutter nearby, Greek ink faded, tax rolls, love notes, a fragment invoking Zeus amid pleas for mercy. In Nahal Zohar's pyramid, a Hellenistic way station unearthed 2025. Its capstone tumbled like toppled idols, bronze tools, and Ptolemaic drachmae mingle with Antiochus's mint, a snapshot of empire's sprawl and snap. These relics bridge the chasm, not abstract atrocity, but fingerprints on clay lamps, boot prints in keyline-fired brick. Ben-Ami's team, volunteers from Tel Aviv's bustle to Boston's halls, sifts under desert stars, their laughter a counterpoint to the ghosts. One evening, a young digger uncovers a bead necklace, carnelian, shaped like lotuses, perhaps a bride's talisman, and the circle falls silent, the weight settling like dusk. It matters because power's machine endures, cloaked in edicts of unity regimes, taxing bodies anew, from forced marches to shadowed claims on the vulnerable. This tale teaches not despair, but the grit in the human frame, resistance born not in halls of marble, but hearths of defiance, where a woman's gaze topples thrones. Universal as breath, it whispers. Erasure fails when memory arms the hand. The decrees sought to silence lineages. Instead, they birthed a light that defies the dark. Return to that jasmine-scented eve in Modiin, the door splintered, the officer's shadow looming. But now, the veil lifts not to violation, but vow Channah's hand in Eleazar's, the grove alive with songs unbroken. What changed? The machine rusted, its gears ground by hands that refused the toll. They were meant to vanish the bride's whispers, the priest's fire, the hill's unyielding song. But they didn't. Carved in cave walls, etched in festival flames, echoed in the archaeologist's careful brush, they endure. And now they're here with you, because you chose to listen. Let that choice be your light. If this tale stirred the embers in you, share one word below. What threshold would you defend? Your voice keeps the story alive.